Thanks, everyone. We're good to go. Everyone good?
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We know this is a really difficult time for the people of New South Wales, particularly the people of the Northern Rivers and the Mid-North Coast, as we await Tropical Cyclone Alfred to cross the coast. I do want to reassure the people of New South Wales, the northern part of New South Wales, that we are here with you during this critical time of emergency, that there have been very significant preparations by the New South Wales Government at every level to protect all of our communities. Every arm of government is working together to make sure we are prepared as possible. We know there is a significant amount of anxiety in the community as we wait for this. Also, we have seen significant rainfall overnight. We have had several emergency warnings overnight and late yesterday afternoon, and Commissioner Wassing will go through those warnings and orders in detail. There have been significant floodings, significant potential for future floodings. There have been strong winds. Our message to the community is please stay safe and help the SES and authorities by making sure you stay away from the oceans. You do not go near floodwaters. Make sure you are prepared, and if emergency services advise you to do something, please follow their orders and their advice. Emergency services are giving advice for very good reasons to keep you safe. It might be about the potential threat of not being able to evacuate in terms of egress. It is very, very important. I can't stress this enough. It is so important to follow the advice of emergency services at all times so that you and your family can remain safe. Please remember to visit the SES website to make sure you're up to date on all the information, that you have the Hazards Near Me app downloaded as well. I want to say that we have thousands of frontline workers and volunteers now on the Mid-North Coast and the Northern Rivers who, while the rest of the country watches on, actually have ran towards danger to help keep communities safe and to save lives and properties. We say that we are indebted to you for being the sort of people that leave their families, leave their homes, and run towards danger to keep other people safe. It's times like this that we are reminded just how much we rely on people like the SES volunteers in this state, and the fact that we have thousands of people willing to do that. We have worked very hard across government to be as prepared as possible. We obviously have pre-positioned thousands of volunteers, assets that belong to the SES. We have proactively closed schools. We're up to more than 300 schools in New South Wales. With the event of this tropical cyclone coming over the weekend and then the impact after that, the schools that are currently closed will remain non-operational on Monday. Lots of teachers and people working in those schools are also local, so they've already been told about that, so we know that they have time to tell their communities that they will remain shut on Monday the 10th of March, because the focus for the government and for the people in those communities is just to remain safe at this point. I will pass on to the Bureau of Meteorology to give an update on the weather situation. But before I do that, I just would say the Prime Minister's just confirmed that there are about 120 ADF personnel in the Northern Rivers to assist with the SES operation, and we are very grateful for their expert assistance. Thanks, Jane.
Good morning, everyone. As Tropical Cyclone Alfred, on our most recent warning, located around about 160 kilometres off Brisbane and still moving very slowly towards the Queensland coast. The current speed of that system, 6 kilometres an hour, and with that speed, expecting it to cross somewhere between Noosa and Coolangatta on Saturday morning. The impacts from that the expected impacts from that for New South Wales are largely unchanged. We have seen some solid rain bands spin off that system and come through northern New South Wales overnight. We're expecting that to continue to happen today. So heavy rainfall falling over the northern rivers, the eastern northern tablelands and the mid-north coast today, and an escalation or a deterioration overnight as Alfred moves close. The wind speeds, we have seen gale force winds continue overnight this morning and expected to continue today along the coastal fringe of New South Wales. We've seen higher than 60 kilometre mean wind speeds. And as that system gets closer overnight tonight and early Saturday morning, we are expecting that those destructive winds to affect that area north of Cape Byron. So winds greater than 155 kilometres an hour in that area up near the Queensland border. The waves have maintained their height in areas Coffs Harbour northwards, around 4 to 5 metre mean speeds, but some mean heights, but some higher waves coming through up around 9 metres. That, along with the higher than usual tides, is meaning water is affecting low-lying areas of coastal areas, particularly around the high tide in the early morning. So we're expecting that to continue for the next couple of days. And generally those large, powerful waves, meaning very dangerous conditions along the coast, along the beaches and out in the water. With that rain having fallen and expected to continue to fall and continue to escalate in the next 24 hours, we do have several flood warnings that are current that are highlighting the potential for major flood levels. These warnings are being updated regularly. The Wilson's has been updated recently with, it's just gone through the minor warning threshold, so that's the rivers have started to respond to the rain that's already fallen, and expecting, the potential for some major flooding at Lismore at this stage would be on Saturday morning. But I'd urge the community to really be looking at the most recent flood warnings that are issued. Along with the riverine response, we will see some localised flash flooding as well that will exacerbate the situation. So the only other thing I'd mention is, as this system approaches, we'll move into more regular updates of our warnings. The tropical cyclone warnings are now being updated hourly as opposed to 3 hourly, because the devil's in the detail, and our specialists are monitoring closely the track of that system. The strongest and the worst weather will be in the hours leading up to crossing close to the core. And I'll hand over to Commissioner Wassing now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. I would like to start by a shout out of thanks to the local communities in Mid-North Coast and the Northeast Northern Rivers, and obviously the emergency services, not just the SES volunteers and staff, but all of the emergency services, all the support services that have not just well prepared, but continue to respond to a very dynamic situation that continues to change. Yesterday afternoon and even last evening, we had issued a range of emergency warnings, evacuation warnings. We currently have 23 emergency warnings across the areas from Tweed Heads, Fingal Heads, right through to Lismore and down as far south as Port Macquarie. Some of those, most of those warnings are based on issues associated with local flash flooding that will and is closing off evacuation routes in many cases, either through storm damage or localised flash flooding. We also are seeing and starting to continue to see low-lying areas becoming inundated, as well as the rivers rising. We are also seeing, and hence the warning in Port Macquarie, tidal impacts and coastal surges that leads to low-lying areas becoming impacted by waters. My key message in terms of warnings, it continues to be dynamic, and with the emerging weather situation, to continue to watch the Hazards Near Me app and tune into and watch the SES website. All of the information is there because it will continue to change. We will see, as the weather and the rainfall continues into today and this evening, we will see further changes in those warnings. So it's not a matter of just watching and looking at the app or the warnings once and then going upset. You need to continue to keep in tune, and we'll obviously also be using a whole range of different methods, including door knocking and face-to-face messaging and meetings with our frontline crews with respect to the local communities as well. Over the last 3 days, we've seen close to 3,000 incidents, and in the last 24 hours, 1,100 incidents. Most of those are still around preparedness activities, which is tremendous to see, but we are starting to see flood rescues where emergency services, SES volunteers, fire rescue and ambulance and other emergency services are needing to respond to people that are driving into floodwaters. I can't be clearer that do not drive through floodwaters. The fact that we're already getting flood rescue calls this early into the incident and the situation will deteriorate in the next 24 to 48 hours, I can't be clearer not to do that, and that's why our key message has been to relocate and now evacuate early before the situation worsens. Whilst some of the overnight conditions may not have been as bad as people may have expected, now's not the time to be complacent. And again, I acknowledge everyone has responded to the messaging very well, and I thank them for that. But it's important that now is not the time to be complacent and to remain in place if you have relocated, or make sure that you don't take activities that you don't need to. I'll leave it at that stage, but again, acknowledge all of the tremendous support of the community and all of our emergency services as we continue to progress into the next 24 to 48 hours. Minister.
Thanks, Commissioner. Just a couple of updates. We now have 17 emergency evacuation centres open, 2 new ones down on the mid-north coast, Nambucca and Port Macquarie. We have 666 people registered at those evacuation centres. Most of them are not there at present, but they have indicated that if an evacuation order does come, that they'll be accessing those evacuation centres, and we're ensuring that we're prepared for those people to come and stay. We have 170 people currently staying in hotel and motel accommodation just to make sure that they have somewhere safe during this weather event. It's really important that people know where their local evacuation centre is. All of the information about their location, about their opening hours, about whether they accept companion animals or not is available on the SES website. I want to reassure people that if you need somewhere to stay, the evacuation centres are open and they are there to welcome you during this event. I want to reiterate the message that it is incredibly important that people listen to the advice of emergency services, know where to access that information and are checking it regularly. This is not the time to go for a swim or a surf. This is not the time to go for an unnecessary drive. People are encouraged to stay where they are, listen to the advice of emergency services. I know that the drawn-out nature of this event, it's a dynamic weather system, the times change, can lead to people being unsure, heightened anxiety and concern. I want to remind people that there are phone services that are available. If you need to have a chat with someone about how you're feeling right now, you can call the New South Wales Mental Health Line, you can call Lifeline, you can call Beyond Blue. It's okay to be feeling distressed and anxious at this time. And if you need someone to talk to, there are services there to support you through this weather event. And the Northern Rivers and the North Coast communities had an incredibly tough time over recent years. They're an amazing, strong, resilient community, but it's okay to not be okay in the middle of something like this, and there are services there to support you if you need to have a chat. We have seen quite significant power outages already across the North Coast and the Northern Rivers. Latest advice indicates over 35,000 people already without power. It's important to note that Essential Energy, the local service provider, is no longer able to have crews out repairing infrastructure. It's not safe for them to do so. And of course, the safety not just of the community but of staff is paramount for the New South Wales Government. As soon as it is safe, they will have people back out there repairing that infrastructure, and they are ready to go with mutual aid agreements from Ausgrid and Endeavour Energy and even into Queensland to make sure that as soon as it is safe, They are there repairing those power lines, but that is not going to be the case for a few days, and people need to be clear and have clear expectations that power is likely to be out for a few days, and the number of people who are without power is likely to grow. As we see the floodwaters rise and the strong winds come through, there could be more power outages. And if you currently have power in this region, we really encourage you, make sure your phone is charged, make sure your devices are charged, make sure there are batteries in your torch. There are practical things you can do to prepare yourself for the fact that we may lose power and it may be out for a few days. We will do everything we can as soon as it is safe to make sure that that power is back on. But in a weather event such as this, there are limits to what we can do to ensure that the power is available at all times. And so people can take steps to prepare themselves, and we encourage them to do that.
Thanks, Rose. I'll just reiterate what Minister Jackson said about the power outage. You can really help by being as prepared as possible as you can be for an outage like this. The same thing has been experienced in Queensland with crews not being on site because of the safety risk. So I suppose the message to the people of New South Wales is do as much as you can in preparation to help the government preparation and the volunteers that are out there running towards danger to try and keep you safe. But we're happy to take any questions.
Deputy Premier, can we just start on the schools?
Yep.
Just the total number closed now in New South Wales, and you said closed on Monday. When will you make a decision about Tuesday?
Yeah, look, across the state of New South Wales, there's now a total of 343 schools, 17 TAFE campuses that are closed. That's a range of government schools, Catholic and independent schools, and obviously TAFE campuses. There's also a number of early childhood centres as well. We've made the decision this morning to keep them closed on Monday. They've already been informed of that. As soon as we know what we're doing on Tuesday, the schools will be informed first and will inform the community. My biggest priority at the moment is keeping the students and the staff of those schools safe. And then that's ground zero, and then there's nothing more important than that. So they'll be closed on Monday at least. In fact, I think you find a lot of teachers that are working in these schools are currently volunteering actually to keep their community safe as well.
In terms of inundation, it sounds like Lismore is going to be particularly bad in terms of the outlook of the Bureau that we've just heard now. I wonder, are there any schools in particular that are at risk of being badly affected as well, and have you factored that in?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to have a look at what the potential damage may be. I would say that a lot of these schools in the Northern Rivers, we are currently finalising rebuilding and have recently rebuilt since the 2022 floods. Some of these schools have been placed on, they look like they're almost on stilts because we have rebuilt them so high up into the ground, off the ground. And obviously, if schools are inundated and if they are damaged, the New South Wales government will repair those schools. In a lot of these school communities, local communities, in these small communities, the school is sometimes the only thing there apart from the homes. So we will do everything possible to make sure those schools are rebuilt if they need to be, are upgraded if they need to be, but our first priority is making sure the staff and the students and that community is safe.
Can I? Go ahead. Just on a matter with the Bureau of Meteorology, it sounded though the major flood warning for Lismore, is that where you're anticipating the worst of the flooding to be as a result? I appreciate the weather situation changes a lot, but is that the outlook at the moment, and where else could experience major floods in New South Wales?
Yeah, so the peak of the rainfall is really from the Queensland border down to north of the Hastings. So it's not only Lismore that would be affected by heavy falls, locally intense rates that could lead to dangerous flash flooding. So, yeah, I wouldn't be putting the emphasis solely on Lismore.
So, Nambucca, all those rivers are at risk of major flooding?
Well, the Tweed, that's a river that's very close to the Queensland border, close to the destructive core of the system and where the intense rain will fall. So that's another one that we're watching very closely, as well as the Brunswick Marshalls. That's another one closer to the Queensland border.
Just a question for the Deputy Premier. Yesterday, the Premier Premier said that evacuation centres were not cruise ships, they were not lifeboats.
Yep.
What is the capacity we're seeing currently in those evacuation centres?
Well, I'll pass over to Minister Jackson, but I think what the Premier said is reflective of the fact that the vast majority of people we know who are locals in the areas affected will find alternative accommodation in the local area or somewhere where they can get to, maybe a friend or a relative. Evacuation centres are places to make sure that you can go and have a roof over your head and that you are safe from the elements. But Minister Jackson is right across this.
Yeah, so we have 17 evacuation centres. They vary in terms of size and to how many people we can accommodate there. At the moment, we have 666 registrations. We're well able to manage that. As the Deputy Premier said and the Premier said, our strong advice to people is if you can stay with family and friends, do that. And we do see the vast majority of people making access of those local networks to find a place to stay if indeed their own home is unsafe. For those who need evacuation centres, we are doing everything we can to make sure that they're safe and comfortable. So bedding is coming in, clothing, basic items like toothbrushes and nappies. We are ensuring that there is food available at them. But it is obviously suboptimal to being able to stay with a friend or relative. I want to assure the community they will be able to access basic amenities at the evacuation centres. But as the Premier said, with everything else going on in this intense weather event, we need to make sure that we're also looking after our first responders and the community more broadly in responding to this event.
And are there any centres that are quite full at this stage?
Look, no. At the moment, we are seeing good capacity across all the centres. As I reported yesterday, the centre with the largest number of people at the moment is the SCU, Southern Cross University facility in Lismore. There are a number of people who are otherwise homeless or at risk of homelessness who are making use of that evacuation centre. We've reached out to our community partners to go into communities where there are people experiencing homelessness and bring them into the evacuation centres. That's a proactive step that we've taken because this is a community where there are a number of people who do experience homelessness. So that's in the Lismore Centre. But even that centre at SCU is one of our larger evacuation centres, so there's still plenty of capacity there. People should be reassured if they don't have anywhere else to go and they do need somewhere to stay, they're welcome at an evacuation centre and we have the facilities on site to take care of them.
Can we get a rough estimation, and I appreciate this may be difficult, of how many people have left their households, whether they're at government evacuation centres, community facilities, other things like that?
Look, I don't have that. The only figure I have is the 666 who have registered for the evacuation centres, but does the SES might have a bit more information as they're doing more community outreach?
Again, we don't have specific figures, but I can with confidence say that the community responded very well in terms of the evacuation orders and also the early relocation. 80% generally of the population will move to family and friends and relatives, and the evacuation centres are the other contingent of that.
Perhaps a better way to ask it, are we looking in the order of thousands of people who have already left their homes?
Yes.
More than
the
10,000?
areas we're talking in terms of the evacuation orders is certainly, we're talking in normal population context, several thousand people, absolutely.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yesterday with the series of evacuation orders that were issued at around 5 p.m,
Yes.
to that 9 p.m. deadline, the number was 7,000 households needed to evacuate. What has that grown to now?
Yes, so in general terms, we're talking in all of the evacuation areas, we're talking a population potentially of 10,000 people in terms of normal context. But again, acknowledging that it's a really dynamic situation. It's quite variable in terms of what that looks like. Lismore is probably the largest localised population in terms of those evacuation areas. But the key message really, which I'm acknowledging, is the fact that the community has responded really well to that, and we're very conscious, and we've continued right from the outset, well before any evacuation orders, to be working with those that are most vulnerable, as the Minister's already indicated.
We've known of 3 flood rescues that have taken place as of this morning. Has that number risen? And can you share any details about what are the circumstances in which the messages are so clear about don't enter floodwaters? Is it the case that people are trying to help people who might be in trouble? Can you share any detail about why people might be going into floodwaters in this context?
Yes. So we have, in addition to the 3, we've had a couple more this morning already. We've had a couple of animal rescues as well. Can't blame the animals in terms of their situation, but that is part of our responsibility, and we acknowledge that's a really important part of our role. As far as people driving into floodwaters, that's the key issue. There's always going to be rare situations where people can get trapped or isolated, and we need to reach out to them and rescue in that context. These rescues are about people driving into floodwaters. The message is clear, as you've indicated. I believe in many cases people are underestimating what they're driving into. You don't know what the depth is. You don't know what is actually under the water in terms of the road. And cars are very susceptible, modern cars in particular, in terms of relatively minor depths of water as soon as you're stuck. Fortunately, we've been able to, all of the people are safe. That's a really important component. In a couple of cases, people have actually been able to walk out as well, which is good.
You said more than 3 now. Do we have a figure yet? Or?
I think we've literally got some flood rescues occurring as we speak, but we're not talking dozens of flood rescues, but it's reflective of localised flash flooding and the fact that people are still moving around, potentially unnecessarily. But the key piece is if you are moving around or if you're still looking to relocate or evacuate, do not drive through floodwaters. We can help you in other ways if you're looking to relocate and can't find an alternate exit.
Perhaps it's worth repeating for people who have evacuation orders and then encounter flood roads that would be on the way to safety. What should they be doing then?
If you encounter floodwaters, the key message is turn around and find an alternate exit. The live traffic is a key app in terms of being able to know where the road closures are. And in the worst case scenario, if you don't know, call 132 500, or if it's an emergency, call 000.
I've got a few questions on housing in the Northern Rivers as a result of this flooding as well. Obviously, the rebuild in 2022 has come about. Some people in that region have wanted it to be quicker and swifter. We now encounter significant weather yet again. Do you understand that frustration, I guess, Minister?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Northern Rivers community has endured a hell of a time over the last few years and is rightfully frustrated at some of the pace of the rebuild from 2022. That's something that the local member for Lismore, Janelle Saffin's been very vocal about, and certainly we've heard that. We have ensured that the rebuild process through the Reconstruction Authority is as rapid as it can be. I, in fact, was up on the Northern Rivers in Kyogle, in Tweed last week, announcing more money for housing, opening modular housing in Casino, delivering more temporary accommodation in Tweed and Lismore. It's the case that there has been a lot of activity that has gone on, particularly in recent years since we've come into government to try and get that moving, but it has been slow, there has been frustration, and I think the community of the Northern Rivers is a really wonderful, strong, resilient community, but understandably this is a really difficult time for them.
And then they get hit again. Is there something that can be done to speed this process up?
Well, I mean, I think we have seen in recent years a real shoulder to the wheel in terms of delivering housing solutions more quickly. Obviously, right now, the focus is on just managing this particular weather event. And I'll be honest, all of the resources of government at this particular moment are on the weather system as it comes through. We are 24 hours from the first tropical cyclone to hit this part of Australia and northern New South Wales in decades. So I think the community can understand all of the focus and the effort is on preparation and immediate response to that weather event, but the housing issues in the Northern Rivers are understood, they are long-standing, and the community should be reassured that the government recognises that as soon as we're through this particular moment, the rebuild, including of housing and getting that moving quickly, is a top priority.
Education Minister,
Yep.
Just on the schools once more that will be impacted by this, that have had disrupted learning through so many things, from COVID
Yep.
then to flooding then to this now. Will there be a specialist kind of rollout program for the Northern Rivers again to kind of, just in the educational sense for these schools?
Look, once we get through this immediate disaster, we'll be pulling out every stop to make sure that no child in that part of New South Wales is disadvantaged. As you said, they've been through a number of significant ordeals. So anything that needs to happen for those students will happen.
And can I just ask as well, into the matter of these hotels and motels, and perhaps this one's better for Minister Jackson, I presume they're free to the people who have been put up there?
Absolutely. So we have 170 people staying in hotel and motel accommodation. That is emergency accommodation that is provided by the New South Wales Government. There's no cost to individuals who are accessing that.
Question for the Deputy Premier.
Yep.
Sorry to change
It's okay.
with this one. Yesterday it was revealed that there were over 7,000 New South Wales public servants living interstate or overseas.
Mhm.
Are you concerned that these servants might be taking taxpayers for a ride, as Crispin said?
Well, look, the Premier has made it very clear that we'll be looking into this as a matter of priority. But I would say that there are some of these people working for the New South Wales Public Service that legitimately live on border towns. At the moment, we're facing a crisis where there are people working for the New South Wales government that may be in the Tweed or just over the border. There may be people in Albury or Wodonga providing a service to the people of New South Wales. But when it comes to things that do not pass muster with the people of New South Wales, I think the Premier's made it very clear that that will be looked at because every single cent of taxpayers' dollars needs to be spent on things that are beneficial to the people of New South Wales.
Just one more on this matter of apologies with me as I just find it up here. Yeah, you were talking about power outages, 35,000. You can't get out to more homes. Do you model for how many homes may be without power? Do you have an estimate of where that could reach to?
Look, we don't, because the reason that people lose power is largely, those really strong gusty winds, vegetation or on power lines or power lines being knocked over. We can't predict where those really big wind gusts are going to come in. I think we can say with confidence there will be more power outages. The extent of the wind and the damaging winds that we're likely to see, it's fair to say people who currently have power should prepare that it may go out.
If there were prolonged periods of power outages, would you consider moving people temporarily into accommodation elsewhere in parts of the town that did have power, for example?
Absolutely. So we will, once the situation is safe, we will reassess what needs to be done to connect people with power or other forms of temporary accommodation. I do want to reassure the community that everything is being done so that as soon as it is safe to go back in and repair that infrastructure, it will be done. Crews are being pre-positioned now with equipment. But it's not safe at the moment for them to go out and do that work. As soon as it is, we will have them on the ground restoring that power as quickly as we can.
Oh, sorry, one last question. Do we have floodplain modelling of the number of homes that could be affected? We've seen it in Queensland, but not for New South Wales just yet.
We have a range of different intelligence systems in terms of floodplain modelling. So we use the Bureau of Meteorology forecasting modelling. That then goes through our whole modelling system in terms of the potential flood risk. Obviously, it's very complicated once it actually lands on the ground, but the modelling is framed around the most likely scenarios through to the highest probable scenarios, and it's on that basis of how we do the public messaging. It's on that basis of how we do pre-deploy our crews, as well as all the other aspects in terms of this very dynamic situation. So we do have those models, we do have those plans, if you will, and certainly that's informing our key messaging out to the community.
Do we have that number figure for how many homes could be affected at that upper end?
Yes, so we're talking 25,000 homes in terms of but again, this is in a really broad aspect of most likely to worst case scenarios. So we're talking significant potential impacts, but some of this is about the preparation, prepare to evacuate, right through to the upper end in terms of current evacuation orders.
Thanks all. Thank you.
Thank you.